Aha, got it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hari Vishwanatha. I teach English, purportedly English, at Santa Monica College, but I also curate this delightful literary series. We are in our 23rd plus year at this college, this series, and we've had a variety of fascinating people from a wide variety of backgrounds to share with us their insights, their creativity, their contributions. And today is no exception. But first, I must wish all of you happy Deepavali. Deepavali, the festival of lights. This past Sunday in India. It's a very major festival, the festival of lights, Deepavali. And also today is a very special day, and I think our guest will appreciate this. It's Children's Day in India, 14th of November. It's actually the birthday of the late first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. He was very, very fond of children, and people loved him. They called him affectionately Chacha Ji, meaning uncle. And so what they decided late in his life, I think he was still alive at that time, but in any case, the country decided that we would celebrate his birthday by celebrating children. So it's called Children's Day. And so it's a very special day, both in India and here in Santa Monica, because we have Diane Ackerman sharing the morning with us and her work. One of the many questions, of course, I have, and perhaps Diane will illuminate this or enlighten us later, does her insurance company know what she does for kicks, for entertainment, and her day job? I don't. Anyway, we'll figure that one out. Diane Ackerman is known as a prose writer and as a fiction writer. Poetry. She has written several books of nonfiction prose, including the unforgettable Natural History of the Senses, but also, as many of you know, The Zookeeper's Wife, and her memoir, 100 Names for Love, a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Critics Circle Award, tells the story of Ackerman's work to bring her husband back from the depths of aphasia after he suffered a terrible stroke, and was described by the Washington Post as a testament to the power of creativity in language, life, and love. She's also a poet. One of the books I've enjoyed is Origami Bridges, Poems of Psychoanalysis and Fire. Her essays about nature and human nature have appeared in a number of publications, including The New Yorker and the National Geographic. Diane Ackerman received an MA, MFA, and PhD from Cornell University and has received many prizes, including a Guggenheim and the John Burroughs Nature Award. And if I may share with all of you just two excerpts from her work. One is from the a section early in Deep Play. She is looking into a pond. Focus on the world inside the mirror, the rippling chiaroscuro, and you can slide down into it. Leaves float on top like gondolas, but a hidden reality seems to vibrate below. The sky in that kingdom is deeper, more brooding, darker than the actual sky above sapsucker woods. As fish and insects touch the surface, they distort the picture. A gentle sunlight lies like tufts of cotton wool in the clumped grasses. There, the air has a razor clarity to it, a brilliance and sharpness that highlights a dragonfly weaving over the pond, here and there pausing as if displayed inside a glass paperweight. When a light breeze shakes the surface of the water, colors ripple over tree trunks, perfectly portrayed all the way down to the encrustations of fungi and peeling of bark. Surely one could peer underneath the islands of matted leaves and see to the distant shore. About 20 half-decayed logs lie like alligators, snout under leaves, front legs in the pond, trunk on the land. Diane Ackerman.
Well, thank you for reminding me of that. It's time to return to Sapsucker Woods. I think I want to see those gondolas of leaves again. I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about what my everyday life is like and what kinds of thoughts are mingling through my brain these days. Life is such a fascinating predicament for matter to get into. On my walks each day, I often look up at the edgeless blue and follow it in my mind's eye to where it becomes outer space. And then I say silently, with reverent surprise, as if I'd only just thought of it for the first time, we live on a planet in space, surrounded by millions of other stars and sunlit worlds. And on this planet, eons ago, just by chance, life evolved. Then I try to picture the cavalcade of life, from grub-like strings of bacteria and velvety knobs of blue-green algae, to curious mammals, then to children playing and discovering the world through the slow motion spell of their senses, and adults hurrying everywhere in all sorts of contraptions, creating a quiver of arts, craving love, some using pocket infernos to light their kilns or their cigarettes, some trying to fathom the succinct chaos from which the universe began. But I love being part of the saga of life on Earth. Yes, loss, suffering, and death do stalk us, but there is never a dull torment. And it's grace just to live among the fruits of summer, to love by design, and to walk the startling earth for what can feel like an endless pageant of days, and to observe the world with quiet gusto and write about it, something that both scientists and artists share. There is a way of beholding nature, which is like a form of prayer, a mix of love, gratitude, and reverence that turns on the little lamp in every cell, unhoods the far too picky hawk of empathy, and welcomes in a fresh burst of unimaginable otherness with affectionate curiosity and wonder. There is a deep down kinship to all living things, but to truly appreciate life's symphony, we need to hear many more of the notes. Soon our telescopes will peer into the roulette wheel of a new solar system, while hope builds its fragile crystals inside of us, and then other solar systems, and will pierce the veils of other worlds, some of which may be throbbing with life. And one day, I hope we'll find the first inklings of intelligent life elsewhere in the star-encrusted night. How will those other planetarians sense, think, create, amuse themselves, cosset their young, if they do any of those things? I'm sure they'll differ from us in countless ways, but life will have whittled them to fit their own ecosystems. They may even appear to us rather beastly. And one far future day, we may visit one another's worlds. In that spirit of cordial reciprocity, I wrote this poem that I'm going to read called Ode to the Alien. I was very lucky as a graduate student to have both a poet and a scientist on my MFA and PhD committees. A.R. Ammons, the poet, Carl Sagan, the scientist, and Carl asked me to write an old-fashioned ode, but to an extraterrestrial. So this is called Ode to the Alien. Beast. Oh, and I called the alien beast because, as I said, I assume that we're going to be thinking that the creature looks very beastly to us. And also, I had been watching the original film of Beauty and the Beast, the one in which Jacques Cousteau was part of. And I think I saw it something like 11 times, enough to know that the Latin on the back of the beast's chair said, all men are beasts when they don't have love. So this is Ode to the Alien. Beast, I've known you in all love's countries, in a baby's face, knotted like walnut meat, in the crippled obligato of a polio-stricken friend, in my father's eyes, pouchy as two marsupials, in the grisly radiance of a winter sunset, in my lover's arm veined like the Blue Ridge Mountains. To me, you are beautiful until proven ugly. Anyway, I'm no cosmic royalty either, but descended from countless rapes and invasions of cell upon cell upon cell. I crawled out of slime. I swung through the jungles of Madagascar. I drew wildebeest on the caves at Lascaux. I lived a grim life hunting peccary and maize in some godforsaken mudhole in the veldt. I may squeal from the pointy terror of a wasp or shun the breezy rhetoric of a fire, but whatever your form, gait, or healing, you are no beast to me. I who am less than a heart flutter from the brute. I who have been beastly so long. Like me, you are that pool of quicksilver in the mist, fluid, shimmery, fleeing, called life. And life full of pratfall and poise, life where a bit of frost one morning can turn barbed wire into a string of stars. Life aromatic with red-hot pizzazz, drumming ha-cha-cha through every blurt, nub, sag, pang, twitch, war bloom of it. Life as unlikely as a pelican or a tardigrade. Life's our tour of duty on our far-flung planets, our cage, our dole, our reverie. Have you arts? Do waves dash over your brain like tide along a rocky coast? Does your moon slide into the night's back pocket, just full when it begins to wane? Even if your blood is quarried, I pray you well and hope my prayer your tonic. I sit at my desk now like a tiny proprietor, a cottage industry in every cell. Diversity is my middle name. My blood runs laps. I doubt yours does, but we share an abstract fever called thought and a common swelter of a sun. So, beast, pause a moment. You are welcome here. I am life, and life loves life. Well, as I'm sure you know, Carl died quite young. It happened to be from a hereditary disease. Nobody had any warning about it. And it came as a great shock to me because we had been friends for a very long time. And I ended up writing this poem, We Die. We die despite appointments and feuds, while our toddler, who recently learned to say no, opens and shuts drawers 100 times a day, and our teen braces for the rapids of romance. We die despite the contracts and business trips we planned, when our desk is untidy, despite a long list of things to do, which we keep simmering like a pot of rich broth. We die despite work we cherish, marrying whom we love, piling up a star-spangled fortune, basking on the Riviera of fame, and achieving, that human participle with no known object. Life is not fair, the old saw goes. We know, but the saw glides slow, one faint rasp, and then at length another. When you died, I felt its jagged teeth rip. Small heart wounds opened and bled, closing as new ones opened ahead. Horror welled, not from the how, but the when. You died at the top of your career, happy, blessed by love, still young. Playing by evolution's rules, you won. Prospered, bred, rose in your tribe, did what the parent gods and society prized. Yet it didn't save you, love or dough. Even when it happens slow, it happens fast. and then there's no tomorrow. Time topples, the castle of cards collapses, thoughts melt, the subscription lapses. What a waste of life we spend in asking, in wish and worry and want and sorrow. A tall man, you lie low, now and forever complete, your brilliant star eclipsed. Lost friend, you taught me lessons I long to learn, and this final one I've learned against my will. The one spoken in silence, warning us to love hard and deep, clutch dear ones tighter, ransom each day. The horror lesson I saw out of the corner of my eye, but refused to believe until now. We die. I just got chills as I finished reading that because, of course, it brought back memories.
Thank you.
In the 1970s, 80s, 90s even, we were talking about climate change, but we were also talking about nuclear winter, very similar situation. And there was a conference about it here, and I attended and was, of course, deeply moved and have been very concerned with climate change since then. And I ended up writing this poem called Nuclear Winter. People with souls luminous as watchdials are talking about winter, when the sun is white cotton in a perishable sky, dust clouds thicken over the earth, water sours, and plants forget how to green. When summer begins at 20 below, and then the seasons fail all living things. Moments ago, we were speechless shadows on the savannah, foragers and hunters of small game. We were tamers of wild beasts, builders of cities. With dreams dark and lusty as roans, we raised families amid the opera of fall leaves and below the deep blue baritone of the summer sky. Moments ago, we magicians used fabulous machines to shove our bodies skyward and around the whole planet in wires, in lights, in pulses, incomparable. Oh, my planet, where I have lingered with the simple daily marvels of egg and loaf, where I have tried to be a modest and able watcher of the skies and of the earth whose green anthem I love. You are captained by madmen and bullies you do not deserve. Oh, my planet, grass luscious with all the adages of summer, we have forgotten that you are fragile and soft-petaled, or we are lost. Forgotten that you are all green fugues in a solar opus, where shrimp and polar bear must spawn, or we are lost. Forgotten how many footfalls from the cave we have toddled, how deftly we must pad the catwalk of our desire, or we are lost. Moments ago, we were veldt walkers forged by curiosity. How have we come to be exterminating angels? For almost half my lifespan, I have lived on this planet, but I still do not understand the wicked beauty of the atom or the Easter Island of the heart. But I do understand winter. In the storm watch for upstate New York, a gray drizzle is falling straight down, stagnant, quiet, as if forever. The deer who leapt fences into our yard to savor summer apples still sweet under the snow have not come for days. Paul is freeing the windsock, twisted and crazy from an impetuous gale. Indoors, I have turned the lily around once again because it cannot find an angle on the sun. In each of us, a live siren has begun wailing, but we are only small forms in a vast white madness. I don't know if you're acquainted with the books of my friend Eva Sobel. She's a science writer who wrote a book about longitude, and now she's working on one about Madame Curie. She's published quite a few over the years, especially about women scientists. We became friends when we were in graduate school, and she was kind enough to have my goddaughter for me. This is a poem that I wrote her when she was working at the New York Times as a science writer, and they volunteered her to go into a sleep lab where they were not allowed to have clocks, they were not allowed to have newspapers, they were not allowed to have windows. They just needed to find out what the body's 24-hour day would become if left to its own devices. And here's a little note about it that was published in the New York Times. Last Friday, Davis Sobel, a science reporter from the Times, entered the Human Chronophysiology Laboratory of Montefiore Hospital to begin 25 days as a research subject. She is cut off from the outside world. Freed of the constraints of the 24-hour day, her body is expected to establish its own biological day. Dearest friend, dead to me by time's present fiction, I read your plight weekly through the dream whirl of print, how they pox your face and arms with high-strung electrodes, chart your blood tides, stint you sunlight and chocolate. A pheasant under glass, you are all alone, yet never alone enough. Glad-eyed by a legion of mute observers, drawn to the oasis of your vital signs. Even your spine begins lower now with a rectal probe. In throwback irony, it's almost a tail. Eeriest of all, you feel blood samples being leached from your veins. At random moments, a quiet tugging, you say. How can I picture you, glass frail in a glass burrow, neon blazing, all your life signs open, with only a syringe's steel kiss on your birthday, yesterday, though you told no one. Outside in the fidget and bloom you crave, summer is like a new philosophy in the air, crammed with wild strawberries and speckle-throated lilies, baby garter snakes lying like pencil leads in the grass, and the pool a single blue shutter where mallards bill dip and ceremonially mate. Sleeping Beauty, I read your Times article this morning and cried. One day, through no fault of our friendship, we'll find ourselves asleep apart forever, betrayed by the green anthem we love and have plighted our word troth to in such different ways, exiled to the nightmare we ferry in ourselves, rubbed to silence by the thickening waves. I don't have any children of my own, lots of inner children, so I'm happy to celebrate Children's Day. And here is a little poem that I wrote when my goddaughter Zoe was born. I heard someone dissing science at the time as an obsession with mere matter. And I thought, well, you just don't understand. There's nothing mere about matter. Matter is quite remarkable. So this is a birthday poem for Zoe. Ultimate immigrant who passed through the Ellis Island of your mother's hips with a name slit loose from its dialect of cell and bone, welcome to the citadel of our lives. We listened for the hoofbeats, your heart, for 9 months, and then your mother nearly died hospitably to give you light. Like a Hawaiian princess, you are carried everywhere, on a litter, in a carriage, by the arabesque of one's arm. Your feet have never touched ground. You who can't even roll over when you want, creamy little tyrant, control the lives of all around you. Sound leaps from your face and your ribs quake each time the downy world chafes. Last week, you first smiled because grown-ups acted silly. Things elude you, but you can grasp absurdity already. By mistake, you suck your wrist instead of mother's nipple, and we laugh. With your operatic cries and Michelin Man pudge and seepages from below and eyes alert as twin deer, you have no sense of self whatever. Zoe Klein, goddaughter with a hybrid name, living in the soft new crook of your mother's arm, with a face like a Dalai Lama's or small Neanderthals. Born out of a dream by two, you live a dream by halves now, slumberous and milky breathed. In time, love will answer questions you didn't raise. A belled marvel, the cat of your inquiry, will stalk through a world that's brighter and more plural than you guess, where a baby's fingerprints, loopy weather systems, one for each tip, will leave you spellbound that matter could come to this. Ever since I was a child, I wanted to be a nature poet. It's just that what I meant by nature included everything from quarks and exoplanets to water bears and neurons. Science and poetry both seem to be throwing buckets of light into the dark corners of existence. And I was enthralled by them equally. I took the universe literally as one verse. By the time I was 13, I was trying to capture small shards and sticky fragments of the world in words by writing poems. And I desperately wanted to be what I thought might be called an adventurous. It took me years to understand the emotional quicksand in that word and realize that what I really meant wasn't an adventurer either, but some sort of scientist poet who patrolled the wilds of the world and the emotional jungle of ourselves with snares made of sentences and darts tipped in the curare of wonder. In time, writing became my form of celebration and prayer, but also the way in which I inquire about the world. And it's always been fueled by wonder, because wonder is the heaviest element on the periodic table of the heart. Even a tiny piece of it can stop time. And wonder, I find, is a very bulky emotion. When you let it fill your heart and mind, there just isn't room for anything else. When that happens, the cinematic rush of life suddenly stops, if only for a moment, and you can seize a phenomenon and play with it until it yields fascinations. Look patiently, affectionately at anything and have 5 or 6 thoughts about it, and that thing, whether it's the moon or a human being, will never look the same again. Especially during periods of crisis, grief, or uncertainty, and heaven knows we all live in personal and, of course, political ones today, we need to find enriching ways to transcend. Worry can narrow the focus very quickly and dangerously, but reconnecting with nature and with our senses widens it again. Wonder cushions the pain with life-saving moments of clarity and consolation. That might include really paying attention to what squirrels do with their tails, or the fact that there are organisms that only live on the lips of lobsters. Yes, lobsters do have lips. That's what you were wondering. Or how astounding it is that we share our world with aromatic lilies and swim teams, and marine iguanas and portobello mushrooms, and romantic loves and tattoos, and pulchritudinously delicious fruits of the earth. Here's a little poem about the sensuous delights of eating one of those pulchritudinous delicious fruits, a ripe apricot. It's called The Consolation of Apricots. Especially in early spring, when the sun offers a thin treacle of warmth, I love to sit outdoors and eat sense-ravishing apricots. Born on sun-drenched trees in Morocco, the apricots have flown the Atlantic like small comets, and I can taste broiling North Africa in their flesh. Somewhere between a peach and a prayer, they taste of well water and butterscotch and dried apples and desert simoons and lust. Sweet with a tang of spice, a ripe apricot is small enough to devour as 2 hemispheres, and ambiguity is its hallmark. How to eat an apricot? First, warm its continuous curve in cupped hands. holding it as you might a brandy snifter. Then caress the velvety sheen with one thumb and run your fingertips over its nap, which is shorter than peach fuzz, closer to chamois. Tawny gold with a blush on its cheeks, and apricot is the color of shame and dawn. One should not be expected to drink wine at midwinter, Boethius warned. What could be more thrilling than ripe apricots out of season, a gush of taboo sweetness to offset the savage wistfulness of early spring? Always eat apricots at twilight, preferably while sitting in a sunset park with valley lights starting to flicker on and the lake spangled like a shield. Then, while a trail of bright ink tattoos the sky, notice how the sun washes the earth like a woman pouring her gaze along her lover's naked body, each cell receiving the tattoo of her glance. Wait for that moment of arousal and revelation, and then sink your teeth into the flesh of an apricot. Well, we were talking before we started up about Pittsburgh, where we both lived at different times. And this is a poem called Lines Written in a Pittsburgh Skyscraper. I was teaching at the University of Pittsburgh. It has taken me 3 years to come to this view. I know now that the body is a river whose bones and muscles and organs are flowing. I have watched their shapes in the molded Allegheny, contained in onrushing below bridge after bridge vertebrae to the Ohio, a brown river that still powers the mind, lying long in the trestle arms of this city whose sentence is hard labor. Eye level atop a church across the street, St. Benedict the Moor stands open-armed and giant, his back turned to the fuming of a ghetto, where some evening the brightest vision is the flash of a street lamp on a jogger's white nightgeese. At night, the red sirens spinning mute across the river converge like pulsars at some accident or crime. An hour later, one pulls off, hovers at a distance. But all is gesture and sign. My students are the children of coal miners who watch the ground swallow their fathers each day, sometimes even digesting the trapped men, turning their bones back into lime, into coal. It is the oldest fear, that earth may recall you. Along the top of Mount Washington lies a stole of color unnatural to sky, twilight's blue collar. But the mountains are a fishing village, steep, hardy, and solid. At night, the lights and stars from my window make the cityscape an Ethiopian bride. As cars bolt around a curve of street lamps, their shadows flash from under them like sprung souls. And the river churning its wet, whispery thighs, the river pouring blood dark under the bridges. In the river, I find my astonished limbs and all the stateless gels within me, carnal, mute, wholly flowing, unburdened toward a distant shore. I don't know if any of you are acquainted with cricket, but I was married to a retired cricket player. My late husband was novelist Paul West, but he also played cricket for Derby. And so I ended up watching a number of cricket matches with him. And on one occasion in the newspaper, it said, "The light is offered to the Indian batsmen, and they accepted it gratefully." The light being offered has to do with whether or not the game is going to go on. And I just found that very profound and poetic and decided to write this poem called Cricket Match. The light is offered to the Indian batsmen, and they accept it gratefully, as I accept the summer morning, a skirl of leaves and land heat, fog enough to send me indoors loaded down with darkness. My mind's snow globe fills with images of my dead parents, and as I turn it gently, they move among a trillion sparking cells, where tiny doors in each membrane open in remembrance. This light is offered to me late when they've retired from play, but I accept it gratefully because our so-called friendlies stirred up such fire and dust that silhouettes became targets, and I missed their interplays, my mother's gamine game, my father's overs early on. No more bat cracking dry air, no more hay bale tumbling, no more bowler roughing up the shine before a long sprint to hurl a ball's hard cheek. No more runners trading places, passing without a glance as they lunge for the ground, bat first, crude love taps. Match call, the pitch empties to a calm we never shared, where I begin to see my parents ghosting through their lives, warm up to final delivery, visible at last in the dim light sometimes offered a batsman when incandescence fades, and I accept it gratefully. I've had the great privilege of spending a decade or so traveling the world to work with endangered animals and see what I could do by writing about them for National Geographic or the New Yorker or different magazines, the New York Times, try to get laws passed that would help them. And one of my travels took me to the Amazon, which was absolutely extraordinary. And there was just so much life per square inch everywhere you looked. While I was there, I wrote this poem called Beija-Flor. Beija-Flor is the Portuguese word for hummingbird, but what it really means, Beija-Flor, is flower kisser. And so it's a love poem. And I tried to include all of the different life forms in the Amazon that I encountered in it. When you kiss me, moths flutter in my mouth. When you kiss me, leaf-cutter ants lift up their small burdens and carry them along corridors of scent. When you kiss me, caimans slither down wet banks in moonlight, jaws yawning open, eyes bright red lasers. When you kiss me, my tiny fist conceals the skull of a sloth. When you kiss me, the waters wed in my ribs, dark and pale rivers exchanging their potions. She gives him love's power, he gives her love's lure. When you kiss me, my heart steals a small breath like a pink river dolphin. When you kiss me, the rain falls thick as rubber. Sunset pours molasses down my spine, and in my hips the green wings of the jungle flutter. When you kiss me, blooms explode like landmines in trees loud with monkey muttering and the casuistry of birds. When you kiss me, a palm cradling the moon in its arms becomes a pictograph for leisure. When you kiss me, my flesh sambas like an iguana. When you kiss me, the river mirror reflects an unknown land. Eyes glitter in the foliage. Ships pass like traveling miracle plays, and coca sets brush fires in my veins. When you kiss me, the river tilts its wet thighs around a bend. When you kiss me, my tongue unfolds wings and flies through shadows as a leaf-nosed bat, a ventriloquist of the twilight shore, which hurls its voice against the tender world and aches to hear its echo rushing back. When you kiss me, Anthuria send up small telescopes. The vine-clad trees wear pantaloons. A reasonably evitable moon rises among a signature of clouds. The sky fills with the pandemonium of swamp monkeys, the aerial slither and looping confetti of butterflies. When you kiss me, time's caravan pauses to sip from the rich tropic of the heart, find shade in the oasis of a touch. bathed in nature, carnal, mute, and radiant. You find me there trembling and overawed. For when you kiss me, I become the all you love, a peddler on your luminous river, whose salted fish are words, daughter of a dolphin. When you kiss me, I smell of night blooming orchids. When you kiss me, my mouth softens into scarlet feathers, an ibis with curved bill and small dark smile. When you kiss me, jaguars lope through my knees. When you kiss me, my lips quiver like bronze violets. Or when you kiss me. Now, obviously, that's a poem that could just go on forever and ever. It's fun writing list poems like that, and that are just free associative image mongering. And I couldn't resist that. And of course, it's nice to give poems like that to somebody that you were thinking about while you wrote it.
I'm glad you gave in to your temptation.
Thank you. I was asked to write a 1,000 word creative nonfiction piece of a poetic sort. And I thought, exactly 1,000 words, huh? You know, not 1,001. It has to be exactly 1,000. So what I decided I would do is write 1,000-word sentence. And needless to say, there are a lot of clauses in it. I hope they all work grammatically. What got me thinking like that is that I knew from reading Milton, who clearly had studied a lot of Latin, that the Latin had taught him how to write very long sentences that were strung together with all different kinds of phrasing. And I thought I would just think about how to do that. This is called When the Deep Purple Falls, and it's about biking around a lake at dawn when absolutely everything was in shades of purple. In the lavender hours after daybreak, before the sun leapt onto the blue stage of the sky to begin its light opera of soul-searing heat, we set out on our bikes to circumnavigate Otsego Lake, which, encircled by dense forest, lay flat as pounded metal, thickly gray-purple with the light mist rising, yet wavering clear like an ancient mirror, the lake the Indians named Glimmerglass, and pedaled hard up a long, steep incline as the temperature of our bodies and the day rose together. And within the aubergine drapery of the forest, twigs crackled, a confetti of light fell through the leaves. Small, quick beings darted among the tree trunks, and an occasional loud crunch or scuffling led our eyes back a million years through several tunnels of instinct to violet shadows we automatically interrogated for bear or mountain lion, or highwayman or warrior, as a mixed chorus of insects and birds sang out, oblivious to our cycles, but mystified perhaps by our talk and laughter, or by the sight of a woman with blonde hair riding a teal bike, wearing black shorts with purple chevrons, the exact color of a mallard duck's underfeathers, and behind her the same thing, but different, a woman with black hair riding a purple bike, both following a road dusted with loose gravel spread in winters past, weaving along undulating mountains which roll the way a dancer rolls her hips as she sprawls, while shadows staggered like eighth notes through the woods. The lake grew calm as cold wax, but the sun purpled and swelled, and sweat began to seep from our faces. So we drank long gulps of clear, warm water from our bottles, not the lake water, deepening to black orchid whenever a castle-sized cloud drifted over, not the mirage of water shivering on baked macadam up ahead, not the salt water plumping up our cells that gives us shape and flow and spirits the mind through soul journeys, but water captured at a spring in Vermont we had never seen, water filtered by rocks, as we are filtered by the sights we see, especially the majestic indigo of this lake, the lavender air, and the night purple convalescing in the forest. As we pedaled into the open where rich growing fields surrender to the sky their perfectly ordered rows of corn, with leaves like iron green collars and tassel shaking glitter in the uproaring sun. Sights we sometimes savored with little comment and a few delicate sips of mind, and yet at other times wolfed down whole vistas. But we both knew the tonic value of the journey that fell somewhere between pleasure and hardship, though we are not the sort of people who picnic on pain or calibrate fun, but we reveled in working ourselves through the landscape, which we discovered tree by tree, farm mile by farm mile, with chicory and Queen Anne's lace bunching in the culverts, pedaling hard, though we were steeped in pure exhaustion, pure exhilaration, leading us through those hinterlands where all emotional battles meet and become one tenderness, knowing that far away behind us in the village of Cooperstown, shops would soon be lifting their awnings, museum doors yawning wide, and the great ladle of enterprise slowly stirring as the sun rose high and the town thrummed with a million colorful intrigues. But we were panting and pushing and pedaling and steadily pulling the day up behind us, changing gears as sunballs of blinding neon raced over the lake and we biked toward noon, not thinking of future showers or rest or the grilled orange roughy served on a lakeside veranda, where we might later stare in amazement at the lake we'd circled, stretching bright as a spill of mercury under the steadfast sun, but happily lost in a long serenade of mauve water and the what will be somewhere around the bend. So that's my 1,000-word sentence. Among the many kinds of nests that writers create for the feathered mysteries that live inside of them, I find poems more like an arrangement of nesting stones, that penguins put together, and prose more like woven mud and twig nests. The architecture of each is slightly different and has its own rules, but they're both good places to hatch ideas. And both really now feel like home to me, but that wasn't always so. Throughout my teens and 20s, poetry was all I knew, so it was the only way that I could know the all. I loved trying to reduce something, the way that somebody walks or the flutter of a monk seal's eyelashes, to the rigorous pungency of an epigram. And I still do love that. But I sometimes craved more elbow room. So I struggled to learn to write prose, which didn't come naturally to me at all. And it was a nightmare chore for years. How I remember putting one sentence at the top of a page, one sentence at the bottom, and having absolutely no idea what to put in between them. I worked brutally hard for about 10 years at it, and then something finally clicked and prose became a familiar country. I discovered that for me, at least, writing poetry and prose is like riding a bicycle and like riding a horse. Some of the same balance and motor skills apply, then you can transfer them. Now I find it fun, fascinating, and even thrilling sometimes to write prose. My muse is happily miscellaneous. And I feel lucky to have been able to use prose as a passport to some of the most astonishing landscapes in the world. When I was an undergraduate, I had 2 cats that got pregnant at the same time. My roommate let in a tom one night, and they had their kittens within days of each other. I guess their scent got confused because the mother cats began stealing and nursing each other's kittens. My prose and poetry sometimes steal each other's kittens, as I try to decide where an image or an observation belongs. If I had a choice, every page of my prose books would be intense, image-laden poetry. but I know the sun can't always be at noon in a 300-page book. Books have to have transitions and contrast and changes of pace. Still, it's by far the more poetic passages that satisfy me the most. Sometimes I don't honestly know if I'm writing poetry or prose poems. And very often the prose may include some of what I think of as unrequited poems, that didn't work for one reason or another. And I decided to insinuate into the prose that I was working on. There are also times when, after writing a nature essay, say, I find I have a lot of emotional spillover and I want to work on some poems. So my book, Jaguar of Sweet Laughter, which is new and selected poems, includes many poems that are set in the Amazon and the Antarctic, which I also wrote about in prose while traveling there to write essays for the New Yorker, and that I included in The Moon by Whale Light. And sensory observations from both trips went into a natural history of the senses. If I hadn't spent a year as a soccer journalist years ago to get atmosphere for a novel set in the soccer world, which I was writing, but never published, I would never have learned as much as I did about the history of play for deep play. And I would certainly never have written the soccer poems in Jaguar of Sweet Laughter, which are really only incidentally about soccer. They're really about the rhythm of the mind and what it means to know the world. You can call all of this cross-pollination if you like, but I prefer to picture my cats just borrowing each other's kittens. And so in that spirit, I'm going to read a little prose about swimming with whales. There is a bay on the way to Antarctica, where mother right whales take their babies and nurse them. It's a bay that's very rich in fish, and it happens to be where Roger Payne, who's most famous, I suppose, for whale songs, discovering the whale songs, set up whale camp. And when I was writing about whales, I went to whale camp for a while. And on one of the days, I sat above the bay overlooking where the whales were. So this is a little episode from there. For hours, I sat quietly and watched the busy nursery bay. A whale named Fang rolled onto her weighty side and her baby nursed. Then the baby got rambunctious and strayed a little too far. Mother lowed to it in a combination of foghorn and moo, calling it back within eyeshot. From time to time, Fang submerged slowly, her tail hanging limp and loose, trailing one tip of a fluke in the water. She made burpy sounds with occasional moans, and I think she may have been napping. When a whale sleeps, it slowly tumbles in an any old crazy end over end sideways fashion, and may even bonk its head on the bottom, or it just lies quietly looking like a corpse. When it rises again to breathe in the midst of its sleep, it comes up as slow as a dream, breaks the surface, breathes a few times, and without even diving, falls again slowly to the bottom. Right whales sometimes sleep at the surface on calm days in Argentina, and some of them seem to be head heavy with their tails light. So the result is that they fall forward and their tails rise out of the water. The behavior of right whales is easy to study because they're at the surface whales. They're so fat that they float when they're relaxed. They spend a lot of time with their backs in the air, and when they fall asleep at the surface, they get sunburned just the way that we do, but on a big whale size way. They don't close their nostrils completely between breaths, and so sometimes they do snore. In fact, they make marvelous, rude after-dinner noises while they sleep. When they wake, they stretch their backs, open their mouths, and yawn. Sometimes they lift their tails up and shake them, and then they go about their business. Often they sleep at the surface so long that, as I say, they do get sunburned, and then they peel the way we peel. And this loose skin from their backs falls into the water and becomes food for birds. But sometimes the birds don't wait for that. They dive down and pick some of the skin off of them. And you can see the whales flinching. Juan, one of the whale camp workers, appeared at the edge of camp on foot, apparently hiking in from a walk to a neighboring bay. Tired? I asked, with an inflection that said, I really hope you aren't. Want to go find some whales? He grinned. Just let me grab a Coke, then vamos. Juan and I tugged on wetsuits, boots, and we went down to the beach and climbed into the Zodiac. A Zodiac, if you haven't been in one, is like an inflatable motorboat. We headed north along the bay and came upon 2 mothers and calves, but the mothers were naturally protective of their calves and hurried them away. We wanted to find a young adult. Juan had been collecting loose skin, that skin that I mentioned peeled off during sunburns. He was collecting them to do a DNA study and then going into the water to photograph the heads of the whales in order to identify them. And I hope to join him. We searched for an hour, but found none in the mood to be approached. Finally, we headed back toward camp and, coming around a bend, discovered Fang and her calf still playing. We cut the motor about 200 yards from the whales. Juan and I slipped over the side of the boat and began to swim toward them, approaching as quietly as possible so that they wouldn't construe any of our movements as aggressive. In a few minutes, we were only yards from the mother's head. Looking down, I saw the 3-month-old baby beside her, the stony markings on its bright nose in the murky water. Slowly, Juan and I swam all the way around them, getting closer and closer. The long wound on Fang's flank looked red and angry. When her large tail lifted out of the water, its beauty stunned me for a moment, and then I yanked Juan's hand to draw his attention, and we pulled back. At 50 feet long, weighing about 50 tons, all she would have needed to do was hit us with a flipper to crush us, or swat us with her tail to kill us instantly. But she was moving her tail gently, slowly, without malice. It would be as if a human being, walking across a meadow, had come upon a strange new animal. Our instinct wouldn't be to kill it, but to get closer and have a look, maybe even to touch it. Right whales are grazers. They have baleen plates, not teeth. So I knew we weren't lunch to her. She swung her head around so that her mouth was within 2 feet of me, then turned her head on edge to reveal a large white patch, and under that an eye shaped very much like a human eye. I looked directly into her eye, and she looked directly back at me as we hung in the water studying each other. I wish you well, I thought, applying all the weight of my concentration, just in case it was possible for her to sense my mood. I did not imagine she could decipher the words, but many animals can sense fear and other emotions in humans. Maybe she could sense this. Her dark plum-like eye fixed me, and we stared deeply at one another for some time. The curve of her mouth gave her a Mona Lisa smile, but that was just a felicity of her anatomy. The only emotion I sensed was her curiosity. That shone through her watchfulness, her repeated turning toward us, her extreme passivity, her caution with flippers and tail. Apparently, she was doing what we were, swimming close to a strange, fascinating life form and taking care not to frighten or hurt it. Maybe seeing us slip over the side of the Zodiac, she thought it had given birth and we were its young. In that case, she might have been thinking how little we resembled our parent. Or maybe she understood only too well that we lived in the strange, dangerous world of the land, where whales can get stranded, lose their bearings, and die. Maybe she knew somehow that we live in that desert beyond the waves, from which whales rarely return, a kingdom we rule, where we thrive. A whale's glimpse of us is almost as rare as our glimpse of a whale. They have never seen us mating. They have rarely, if at all, seen us feeding. They have never seen us give birth, suckle our young, die of old age. They have never observed our true society, our normal habits. They would not know how to tell our sex, since we hide our reproductive organs. They would find it especially hard, I think, to distinguish between a clothed, short-haired, clean-shaven man and a clothed, short-haired woman. When Fang had first seen us in the zodiac, we were wearing large, smoked plastic sunglass eyes. Now, we had small eyes shaped like hers, but two on the front of the head, like a flounder or a seal, not an eye on either side like a fish or a whale. In the water, our eyes were encased in a glass jar, the snorkeling mask. Our mouths stretched around a rubber tube, and our feet were flippers. Instead of diving like marine mammals, we floated on the surface. Human beings possess such immense powers that few animals cause us to feel truly humble. A whale does, swimming beside you, as big as a reclining building, its eye carefully observing you. Suddenly, Juan pulled me back a few feet, and turning, I saw the calf swimming around to our side, though staying close to its mother. Big as an elephant, it still looked like a baby. Only a few months old, it was a frisky pup and rampantly curious. It swam right up to me, turned one eye to look, took a good look, then wheeled its head around to look at us with the other eye. When it turned, it swung its mouth right up to my chest, and I reached out to touch it, but Juan pulled my hand back. I looked at him and nodded. A touch could have startled the baby, which might not have known its own strength yet. In a reflex, its flipper or tail could have swatted us. It might not have known that if humans are held underwater by a playful flipper, say, they can drown. Its flippers hung in the water by its sides, and its small nose markings looked like a crop of field stones. Swimming forward, it fanned its tail, and the water suddenly felt chillier as it stirred up cold from the bottom. The mother was swimming forward to keep up with it, and we followed, hanging quietly in the water, trying to breathe slowly and kick our flippers as little as possible. Curving back around, Fang turned on her side so that she could see us and waited as we swam up close again. Below me, her flipper hovered as large as a freight elevator. Tilting it very, very gently in place, she appeared to be sculling. Her tail, too, was barely moving. Each time she and the baby blew, a fine mist sprayed into the air, accompanied by a whoomphing sound like a pedal organ. We did not have their insulation of blubber to warm us in such frigid waters, and growing cold at last, after an hour of traveling slowly around the bay with them, we began to swim back toward the beach. To save energy, we rolled onto our backs and kicked with our fins. When we were a few hundred yards away from her, Fang put her head up in what's called a spy hop. Then she dove, rolled, lifted a flipper high into the air like a black rubber sail, and waved it back and forth. The calf did the same. Juan and I laughed. They were not waving at us, only rolling and playing now that we were out of the way. But it was so human a gesture that we automatically waved our arms overhead in reply. Then we turned back onto our faces again. Spears of sunlight cut through the thick green water and disappeared into the depths. A bottom soon revealed itself as tawny brown about 30 feet below us, and then the sand grew visible, along with occasional shells, and then the riot of shells near shore, and finally the pebbles of the shallows. Taking off our fins, we stepped from one liquid realm to another, from the whale road, as the Anglo-Saxons called the ocean, back onto the land of humans. And now I'm going to read just one more poem. And I think that will be it for today. A couple of years ago, one of the magazines decided that both the Republicans and the Democrats now wanted school prayer to return to schools. And the question was going to be, well, what kind of prayer? And so they approached a number of fiction writers and poets, and they asked us to write a school prayer. And on the one hand, I didn't want students to feel that they had to worship someone else's idea of God, or to worship at all if they didn't wish to. On the other hand, I didn't want them to turn away from a sense of spirituality, because that even eco-spirituality brings with it so many wonderful feelings and qualities and important things to share with the rest of people on the planet. And so I ended up writing school prayer. In the name of the daybreak and the eyelids of morning and the wayfaring moon and the night when it departs, I swear I will not dishonor my soul with hatred, but offer myself humbly as a guardian of nature, as a healer of misery, as a messenger of wonder, as an architect of peace. In the name of the sun and its mirrors and the day that embraces it, and the cloud veils drawn over it, and the uttermost night, and the male and the female, and the plants bursting with seed, and the crowning glory of the firefly and the apple, I will honor all life, wherever and in whatever form it may dwell, on earth my home, and in the mansions of the stars. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Unforgettable. Well, we have a few minutes still. So please, if you have any questions or comments, please. It is absolutely wonderful that you have just confirmed what I experience whenever I read your work. I have no idea whether I'm reading prose or poetry.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah, and I think it's good to steal one another's kittens. I think that's a great idea.
Well, there's so much that lies between what we can say with words, in conversation and also in prose, which is why we love poetry, and probably why in the last few years there's been such a return to reading poetry, and looking for the kinds of enduring values and things that we find in poems. But there are also times when, as I said, I need more elbow room. I just don't want to part with the poetry at the same time.
There is no danger of your abandoning poetry.
I don't think so. I'm working on a new book of poems also, so yeah.
Well, please, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question for Diane or a comment, please go ahead. A quiet audience. You can put it in chat if for some reason your audio is not working well. I'm monitoring chat, so don't hesitate.
I had a question.
Rivka, go ahead.
Yeah, what inspired you really to write about, the beauty of life? Like, I understand you said that it was something that you were interested in, but what motivated you to write wonderful poems about it?
You mean to celebrate life, to write positive poems very often?
Yes.
Well, especially when I'm writing poetry or prose about the planet, climate, endangered animals, and so on, there are gloom and doom naturalists out there, and it's very important what they do. But I don't think that's the way to convert people. I think that if you celebrate an animal or an ecosystem, you have a chance of having people fall in love with it as you have, and then they will fight to protect it. And so that's always been my strategy. But also, I've only ever been about 11 inside, you know. I still wake up really startled to be alive on the planet and to be surrounded by all of these marvels, some of which I mentioned when I was reading. There's always something new. And even if you go over the same walk every day, there is something new, especially if you decide to, let's say, just feature one of your senses on the walk. This morning I was walking and I was just looking at shadows, which is a wonderful thing to do. Cloud shadows, all the different kinds of shadows. And you discover that, well, for instance, that the shadows below clouds really aren't black, they're more like blue. But it just gets you thinking in different ways. And in my case, feeling such a sense of privilege to be alive on this astonishing planet that has so much life in it. That's not to say that there aren't extraordinary problems that we have to work on. No question about it. Not just protecting the planet, but also in terms of prejudice and so many health things that are going on, just so many problems that we have to face as one species working together. And sometimes I write about that. I wrote about it in The Human Age, for example. But because of where I come from, a place of wonder, The Human Age is not just about how our relationship with nature has changed, but how our relationship with every single facet of nature has changed in good and bad ways, in electronic ways, in old-fashioned ways, in all different kinds of ways. And all of that happening in just the last 15, 20 years. I couldn't resist doing that. And there certainly is a lot of very serious looking at climate change and what we need to do. But as you rightly noticed, I prefer celebrating the world. I just always have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rivka. Thank you, Diane. We have time for just maybe half a question. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, including Diane's, who has been so generous in sharing with us a zest for life. That's what a poet is. That's what a writer is. Someone who has zest for life. So this brings me to the least favorite part of the event, which is to say to everybody, well, we have to stop, although I don't want to stop. But Diane, thank you so much for sharing with us your rich experiences and your wonderful insights through your creativity, through your imagination. And if I may share with all of us a small excerpt from one of your poems, The Lighthouse. One wonders, what does a poet do? What does a writer do? I thought that these lines spoke to that very eloquently. A liquid light that construed the gloom and gave a living, sumptuous quality and eminence to everything. I think that's what writers like you do, make everything eminent and sacred and holy, so that living itself becomes a form of prayer.
Yes, I really think that is a writer's calling, to do that. And just pay attention to the world.
Thank you very much, Diane, for reminding us of that most important element in the periodic table of the heart, and that is wonder.
Thank you for your hospitality. It's been a joy to join you, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the term.
Thank you. All the best. Thank you.
Bye from upstate New York.
Bye-bye.